Good morning from another world. We're between two cloud layers here in the Drakensberg. When we left the tents this morning, it didn't look particularly hopeful, but I'm so glad we got up. It's so dramatic and it's so simple as well. So I'm just trying to shoot minimalist images, just the ridge with amorphous cloud on either side, focusing on shooting negative space and getting a sense of vastness and emptiness into my images, which these kind of conditions are perfect for. The conditions are showing some promise, but we have been in the cloud now for a good 15 minutes. Sunrise has been and gone, and the ridge is somewhere over here. There's Alex and our cameras. And the abyss. But I've taken some really nice minimalist images that I'm quite happy with, very different to what I've shot here before. And yeah, the more I stand here, the more I think maybe this cloud is just going to drop enough that we're going to get another view of the ridge. Okay, well, waiting paid off. I think we can agree that this is more next level stuff. Ah, what a morning. That is ridiculous. The sun's just tucked in behind a cloud, so it's giving fantastic contrast. I'm just going to continue shooting for a bit longer. But obviously I'm just shooting the main ridge here, and then I'm also trying to get a shot of Cathedral Peak alone, maybe with even more, a composition like that works brilliantly for me. This is just crazy. I love how Cathedral Peak and the bell there are casting this stunning diagonal shadow. I think this encircled view is the way to shoot now, so I'm going to move my camera back and shoot at a wider angle to get that kind of idea. I've also shot a tighter frame, something like this. We're at our camp nice and early today, not far from our viewpoint, which is up there. So that's where we're going for sunset and probably for sunrise too. This is a pretty special campsite. If I just whip you round quickly, then you can see our subjects through this gap here. The mist that we've been walking through all day has just lowered as we arrived. And that there is the column on the right and the pyramid on the left. Pretty good from our camp. And the direction we came from is up there, Elephant and Cockade. Well, it's cloudy at the moment, so we're having tea, which we haven't managed to do yet because we've been so focused on the photography. This is actually my second time recording this clip because Joe was so glum the last time we tried doing it. but now he's putting on a smiley face. Yeah, so these stoves are pretty excellent actually. Self-contained systems, pretty good in the wind. And yeah, we've all got different types of teas, so this one is yet to boil. I tend to boil them over. That is continuity, Joe. That is exactly what it is.
Well, I assumed you just cooked it.
Well, it's happening again. I just fired off a composition that I think works, but I think the difficulty now is that in order to get a view down to pyramid and column down here, you need to have a foreground right on the edge of a cliff, or otherwise you can't get the viewpoint steep enough down over those pinnacles to work a composition. And nothing's going to work here, look. What a shame. So maybe the other way towards Cathedral Ridge. I'll try that. So I've only got half a minute left, so I'm signing off. Unfortunately, I was unable to find a shot before the light went, but the scenery isn't too bad here. And check out that sky. Got some anti-crepuscular rays coming down. Now, compositionally, I mean, sure, it's tempting to just shoot that, but I'm not really sure that it works. But it's a pretty amazing thing to see all the same. Now, this angle of pyramid and column is fantastic. So I'm going to come back here tomorrow morning. I think the others are going to be down on this ledge. In fact, you can see, I think it's Ryan over there. Gives a sense of the scale of the place. But maybe these bushes in the foreground and just pyramid and column, so just a very simple shot. And I will probably try that now because the inversion level is quite high. So a portrait frame, I've been shooting a lot of portraits on this trip. It's tempting to include this really round bush, but then that introduces the straggly ones there on the left, which I really don't like. So probably just going to try including these near ones and pyramid and column in the back there, so keeping it simple. The sunrise is somewhere over there, so at sunrise there's obviously the potential that these bushes will catch some light. So that's enough for a plan for tomorrow for me. And what a lucky day yet again. This really has been a crazy, crazy trip.
Check that out, not bad, eh? This luck just keeps coming, and the late light is just producing a warm glow on that cloud just coming across the hill there that's fading away now. So I just shot a still that I think is going to work brilliantly, and the cathedral ridge there is just poking above the cloud, providing this little bit of interest. It's been beautiful watching the mist rolling over that ridge. It really has. Another amazing evening, and evenings like this are really hard to come across in the Drakensberg, I have to say.
And that was the end of our 6th day in the Drakensberg, and what a day it was. Pretty unusual to get good conditions at sunset, although we did on a few occasions on this trip, which pretty much makes it the most successful trip I've ever had to the Drakensberg. But the highlight was certainly this particular morning. I didn't show this photo of Alex here stood on the edge of the cliff, but I love it for its obvious sense of scale. But going into the photos that I showed in the video, this was the first one I took to give a sense of that openness, just working with negative space and really diminishing these peaks in the background. This is Cathedral Peak here, and this one's called the Bell, which looks very bell-shaped from other angles. Shooting relatively wide like this and looking into the mist does actually diminish the peaks quite considerably compared to the kind of visual impact that they had whilst you're stood there, because they feel quite close and quite large. But I do like it for the sense of space that it gives, very different to my other images of the Drakensberg. I also don't have that many abstracts of the ridges there, because I'm quite particular, and I'm looking for an abstract that really abstracts the landscape and creates a sense of mystery, if you like. I think on first glance people might wonder if this is snow or ice, or just need to figure out exactly what they're looking at, and I like having that sense of uncertainty in an abstract. So the amount of mist there was just perfect, and again I shot a few different frames of this so that I could pick the one that had the right density of mist. And this scene, it sort of went in and out, this mist for a little bit, and so I was trying to get the right balance. This cliff on the right here, particularly this line, was far too strong most of the time because the mist just wasn't there, and so it was this very dark shape. So I waited for a moment when it started to become obscured, and that's when I took this photo. I did also take a perfectly symmetrical shot of the ridge, well, more like that actually, which worked a little better, obviously, at completely eliminating that sense of asymmetry. But on reflection, I think that having that bit of depth that right hand side brings in actually adds a bit of interest to the image. Perhaps it was a little bit too simple to shoot it symmetrically, so that's why I ended up selecting this particular shot. And then the sun came out, and it was pretty exciting, obviously, and watching the clouds swell beneath us, which are infinitely more beautiful when they've got sunlight and shadow upon them. You can see this very consistent cloud level just here. Also produced some really nice shadows off Cathedral Peak and the Bell, which was great. This one I probably won't put in my portfolio, but it's quite nice. But I prefer the wider view here. This section, which I honed in on the video, is certainly the most interesting portion of the image. This lovely wave being flicked up here, and there's some really nice light on these pinnacles. So there's a good sense of depth there, and I kind of wish that I'd shot a long lens image in there, or a longer lens image. I didn't, and these things don't last very long, so that's one of those things. But I'm pretty happy with how this one came out. One distraction perhaps is this bit of blue skies creeping into the top here, but were I to put the frame to compose that out, I think it just gets a little bit too tight, and maybe you then have to lose some of the foreground as well. I mean, it kind of works, but I think I'll probably keep that blue sky in. And then I tried to get a shot, a landscape version of this, in fact, so something like this. But the foreground then didn't really feel like it belonged with the rest of the image, and I realised that shooting in portrait at a much wider angle than I obviously would have been able to if shooting that landscape frame, because that there is, I don't know, 40 millimeters maybe. Maybe a bit wider than that, and then here I'm at more like 24 millimeters, so you get this great sense of perspective, and this bunch of grasses in the foreground is really fantastic. So I like the way the image works together here, and I'm not too worried about the 50-50 split here, which is something that classically you would look to avoid compositionally, because I think it just balances nicely. Right, so on to the evening shoot, and I'll have to apologise for the lack of video content there, because I was kind of expecting it to be a bit of a scouting trip for the morning, and then the light just started to improve, and we had some decent opportunities to take some photos, but as a result I was very pressed for time. So I took this photo really just to record where we camped. You can see the tents down here. And I'm glad I did. I think you can fall into a trap as a landscape photographer of just focusing on the image. It's a bit of a balancing act, because of course if you don't focus enough, then you will never get those really perfect shots where you've got a nicely balanced composition combined with pleasing lighting. But nevertheless, when I can, I like to take photos like this. And if you're wondering why I don't absolutely love this, it's basically because everything is on this right hand side of the image. There's a lot of empty negative space here. There's only really the horses here for interest. And also, if you put the sun in the frame like this, I mean, it really does dominate the show. So I do put the sun in the frame from time to time, but you have to be a little bit careful when you do, because like I say, it rules everything else. Now moving on to these two portrait frames, this first one in the sunlight. The sunlight here actually, I think, creates a bit too much contrast and distraction. It's all a bit broken. I don't particularly like the way these bushes look together. I think compositionally it's okay, but it's not really clean enough, and I find the yellows slightly insipid here. And the foreground and background, unlike that previous image from the morning which I shot in portrait, they don't really work together. They don't feel like they fit as one image, and so there's this disconnect that I don't like so much. So I don't think I'll be doing anything with that one. This one I like a bit more. It's got a bit more of a sense of mystery to it, and certainly tonally it balances better because there's no sunlight on the foreground. So I mean, I guess that's an important takeaway, that it's not always the case that nice golden light on the foreground is going to be the best kind of light. One difficulty I had here is that ideally, balance wise, I think I would have put the top of the frame somewhere here and eliminated the sky, but when I tried that, it just looked a bit boring. So ultimately I've left it in, and I think it kind of works. So I'll sit on this one and see what I'm going to do with it. And then here, another very simple negative space image. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with this one. I guess I kind of shot it with an idea to it being potentially something that I could overlay text on, because I certainly prefer this final image. The crucial point here is understanding how the balance of the composition might change as the conditions do, because whilst I felt this had a nice sense of depth and this ridge in the background is obviously wonderful, this shape here is a real problem. And until that mist came in, it was just this hulking mass that completely threw the composition. So I waited for the mist to come in, and this is the result, and I think it balances a lot better. Of course, you do have a lot of darker tones on this left-hand side, so the balance is a tiny bit awkward. And I know some people don't think that it works, because I ran it past a few of the guys on the trip actually, but for whatever reason it feels right to me, so this one's going to go into my portfolio as well. I do have 2 more videos, I think, to do from the Drakensberg. Obviously, it's January now, so I've failed rather epically to turn out these videos as I'd hoped. But I do have a deadline of next March, which is when I return to the Drakensberg. So I will try and get those certainly out before then. And thank you for your patience waiting for these videos. So that's all, and thanks very much for watching.